So continuing looking at how we can conquer heart disease, how we can keep the heart with all diligence, because out of it are the issues of life. What I wanted to do in our first presentation is give you background and give you reasons why heart disease happens and to show you the truth on it. So now we're looking at what you can do to conquer heart disease. And our first one is stopping anything that could contribute to it. Another one is caffeine. How does caffeine contribute to heart disease? How does caffeine contribute to high blood pressure? When a person takes a cup of coffee, or eats a whole block of chocolate, or eats or drinks the Dr. Peppers or the Coca-Colas with their high caffeine content, the reaction in the body is very similar to a crisis reaction. And whenever there's a crisis reaction, the body goes into a fight and flight mode to cope with the crisis, and the blood pressure rises. And so that's how caffeine contributes to high blood pressure. One of the most common carbohydrates that people eat is wheat. And last night we looked at how wheat has been hybridized in the 1950s, and because of the complex protein or gluten structure that was created in the hybridization of the wheat, that has an allergy response in many people. And when there's an allergy response, blood pressure can also rise. So the two things that can contribute to heart arrhythmia, which is the unnatural or the imbalanced heart rate, is caffeine and the hybridized wheat. So they must be stopped. So the refined carbohydrate that is the one that's contributing most to this is the hybridized wheat. And there are wheats that are not hybridized. There's your spelt, kamut, enkenhorn. They're called ancient grains. You can still get products made out of those. So things must stop. If you don't turn the tap off, you're still going to be mopping up in the other corner. So these are the things that must stop. Number 2, hydration. When we are dehydrated, that can contribute to pressure in the cells, getting the blood pressure up. So we should be having 8+ glasses of water a day, and before every glass of water, the whole salt. This brings the balance back. Number 3, plant-based diet. A plant-based diet which is high in fibre, and all whole foods have fibre, high fibre. And traditionally, all your carbohydrates were either well cooked or cultured. There's a book called Nourishing Traditions by Sally Fallon, and she has a look at the way traditionally grains were cooked. People had fuel stoves, and so it was put on the corner of the fuel stove, the grains, and they were cooked long, slow cooking. We don't have fuel stoves today, but you can buy slow cookers. And you can have your millet, or your buckwheat, or your rice, or your quinoa. That can have a lovely slow cook all night for your breakfast, if that's what you'd like. And the best way to have bread is in the sourdough method. The sourdough method is a cultured bread, and the culturing of that grain breaks down the protein or the gluten in the grain. So basically, the sourdough process pre-digests your grain, so it's a lot easier to digest. Now, this happened to me about 18 years ago. We had a speaker coming from America. He was a speaker that was speaking on religious subjects, and we got him to come over for a set of meetings we were giving. He came in from the airport. My husband brought him in. He was very hungry, and I had salad and baked vegetables and legumes, and I had our freshly baked bread. You can eat sourdough bread straight out of the oven because it's in a pre-digested form. Isn't that good news? You can eat hot bread. The next day, he came into the kitchen and he said to me, "What was that bread?" And I thought that he was upset because he was strong. He said, "I have to tell you, when I got off that plane and got into your house, I was hungry. And your food was magnificent, your bread was delightful. I can't eat bread, but I was so hungry and your bread was so nice, I had 2 slices. He said, "If I eat bread, I get bloating, I get discomfort, I often get diarrhea." He said, "No discomfort, no diarrhea. What was that bread?" I said, "It was the sourdough bread." About 25 years ago, a girlfriend of mine met an old German woman in a park. And they got chatting, and my girlfriend discovered that this German woman had the sourdough starter that her mother and her grandmother had. She brought it from Germany. And she gave my girlfriend a little bit of that starter. And that's the starter that I used for many, many years. My daughter brought it with her over to America, and her good friend Tristan, she gave some to him, and that's the simple needs bread that you can get. We have been having some at lunchtime. So isn't that good news? You can still get that. But that's why that bread caused no discomfort to this man. So when you've got a high fibre diet, make sure your grains and your legumes are well cooked, well soaked, or cultured so that they're digestible. Generous proteins. And remember those legumes, they must be soaked, very well rinsed. Get that dirty water away. And your nuts and your seeds are also excellent forms of protein and fats. So these are the 3 essential food groups. Number 4, exercise. The heart is a muscle, and the more you use that muscle, the stronger it gets. And the form of exercise that is the most potent in strengthening the heart muscle is the high-intensity interval training. I read a book called Body by Science by Dr. Doug McGuff. And this doctor, who's a heart doctor, he was looking at a form of exercise to help his heart patients strengthen their heart. And he discovered that the high-intensity interval training was the most effective. And as the name implies, these are intervals of high intensity, intervals of recovery, and they're usually done for a cycle. Now, looking at the many books I've read on the high-intensity exercise, one book I read was PACE by Dr. Al Sears, called The Exercise Doctor. Another one was Fast Exercise by Dr. Michael Mosley, and also The Body by Science by Dr. Doug McGuff. And they all have found that this form of exercise is the most potent. But what I appreciate with Dr. Doug McGuff, he goes inside the cell and shows you why it is so effective. Most of the research has been done on an exercise bike, because with an exercise bike you're holding on. So if you've got knee, ankle or hip problems or balance, you're holding on and you can cycle as fast as you can. And then recovery time is usually about 90 seconds. This is no gentle stroll. This is running for your life. Can't run, exercise bike. Swimming, push-ups. Can't push-ups, start with the wall. Everyone should do push-ups. Maybe it's rebounding. You've got to find the type of exercise that suits you. So high intensity is going as hard and as fast as you can. As I think I told you, Sasha, who's usually here with the little ones up the back, she came with us this morning and she had the baby in the pram and she was ahead of us and she was pushing the pram. and we were all doing our high intensity. I have to count, because if I don't count, I don't quite go to the 30 seconds. With this high intensity exercise, by the time you get to the end of your 30 seconds, you're breathing very deeply, very hard. And in the book PACE, PACE means progressive acceleration of cardiopulmonary exertion. So let's go to the first one, progressive. What you can't do today, you will be able to do. Build up to it. So if you could only do 2 push-ups, that's perfectly fine. The next day, hopefully you'll do 3. Maybe a week later, when your abdominal muscles aren't so sore because you started push-ups and you weren't used to them, you might get to 4 or 5. Build up to them. That's why the first word is progressive. Acceleration. You are moving. You're running for your life. This is intense exercise. But the good news is it's only 30 seconds. If you don't think that's long, try it. It's a long time when you're going very hard, very fast. So progressive acceleration. C is cardiopulmonary. The heart muscle, the more you use it, the harder you push it, the stronger it gets, and the stronger it gets, the less it has to beat. So let's compare a heart that has a pulse of, let's say, 46 beats per minute. That heart is so strong, so powerful, it doesn't have to beat much. So it's boom, boom, gosh. That's like emptying the bathtub with a bucket. But let's look at someone who's got a resting heart rate of 75 beats per minute. That's boom, gosh, boom, gosh, boom, gosh. They're emptying the bathtub with a little teacup. It is estimated we only have so many heartbeats per lifetime. Which one's going to last? The strong one. And how much rest does it get? Boom, boom, rest. Boom, boom, rest. Whereas the little tiny one, boom, boom, rest, boom, boom, rest, boom, boom, rest. And this isn't genetics. It's exercise. The more you exercise, the more you push your heart, the stronger it gets, the less it has to beat. So cardiopulmonary. So looking at Dr. Alseer's book, PACE, Progressive Acceleration, the C takes in cardio and pulmonary. That's your lungs. And what the Framingham Heart Study found, remember that famous heart study, it found that by the age of, I think it was by the age of 60, people had lost 40% lung capacity, the average person. By the age of 80, they'd lost 60% lung capacity. So if someone's lost 40% lung capacity, does that mean only 60% of their cells are giving 36 units of energy? If someone's lost 60% lung capacity, does that mean only 60% of their cells are giving this? All the rest are only giving the 2 units of energy? Because that's where the gaseous exchange takes place. So why have people lost lung capacity? Because they've stopped doing this. And many people only breathe with their high chest. They're not breathing with their abdominal muscles. And when you run for your life, your lungs really stretch. And you might find when you start doing this, it hurts. Don't worry about that. That's all those little bronchioles in the bottom part of your lungs that haven't been used for a while. How can you stop losing that lung capacity? You do this every day. And if you have lost, how can you regain it? By doing this every day. No wonder so many people in their 60s, 70s, 80s, what's their complaint? Always tired. And if I say to them, do you exercise? What's the answer? Oh, you don't understand. I'm too tired. Well, guess how you get energy? You will receive more energy than you expend on your morning walk. So recovery time, the research shows that the best recovery time is not stopping, though you might feel to. Though you might feel like you'd like to just have a little rest. The best recovery time is to keep moving. So if you're on an exercise bike, slowly cycle. If you're on the rebounder and you've been leaping or jogging on the rebounding, you might just do this for your rest. What Michael and I do is we run up hills and we walk down hills. Then we run up the next hill. So it's the walking down that is our recovery time. And if I know recently I had quite a big hill, so I did 30 seconds and I just did half the hill. So then I turned around and I just did some stretches. Did some stretches with the arms, with the shoulders, with the legs, stretch the legs. So just do some gentle stretches. So gently move the body until that, once again, your breathing has come back to normal. It's usually done for a cycle of 6. Now the maths on that is not very long. That's only 15 minutes. Now remember why Doug McGuff did this. He did this for his heart patients. But I want to show you what that's doing. So the 20-step pathway is a very fast pathway, whereas the 8-step pathway is a slow pathway. And there's a rate-setting enzyme in there that will always keep them, this one slower, that one faster. So when you're doing the high-intensity interval training, and when you get to the end of your first session, your first 30 seconds, 20-step pathway speeds up. 8-step pathway speeds up. No wonder, you're running for your life. But because that fast pathway is going so much faster, it's making more pyruvate than can be fed into the 8-step. And so what it does is it causes the excess pyruvate to be stored as lactic acid. You've heard of lactic acid. But what's exciting about this is in recovery time, when you're just doing some gentle stretches or some gentle cycles, your liver converts that lactic acid back into pyruvate and feeds it into the powerhouse. You know what that means? When you're in recovery time, you're burning just as much fuel as when you're running for your life. That's good news. But the other good news is your lactic acid is getting mopped up. And that explains why this is such a powerful form of exercise. You will find that all personal trainers are training their athletes in this now because they have found that this sort of training gives them an edge. And of course, in competition, you've got the best athlete from every nation, the best athlete from every town. And this form of training gives an edge. It's also less time and yet more powerful. So the person that does the high-intensity interval training, they will find that their fitness levels exceed the person that does the 5K jog every day. I love it because I don't have a lot of time. I'm very busy. I just have a tiny little chunk every day. So when we're getting to our second set of high-intensity interval training, now the glycogen stores are getting plucked. Remember, these glycogen stores are like a little bunch of grapes. They're little molecules of glucose already sitting in the muscle cell, getting plucked, sent down the pathway, plucked, sent down the pathway. But probably by the end of the third set of high intensity, we're running out of glycogen stores. So what's the body going to use for fuel now? The brain causes the pituitary gland to release the human growth hormone. And the human growth hormone, it's very busy when we're growing. When we stop growing, it goes into retirement. I stopped growing at 16, that's probably not a surprise to you. But my son William, he grew 2 inches from, I think it was 20 to 22. Boys can still be growing a bit later. But it goes into retirement when we stop growing. But you've created a bit of a crisis in the body with this high intensity running for your life. Like there's a tiger after you. And so we're running out of fuel and the human growth hormone is released. And it activates a hormone that releases fat cells, which is hormone-sensitive lipase. Hormone-sensitive lipase is the enzyme that breaks down fat stores. Tomorrow, when we look at fats and we look at digestion, we're going to see that there are different lipases released in the body to break down the fat we eat. Whereas this lipase, it's breaking up the fat stores. The human growth hormone also stops burning glucose as fuel and becomes a fat burner. And we can see why when we look at how glucose only gives 4 calories per gram, whereas fat will give 9 calories per gram. And a calorie is a unit of energy. So with this high intensity we're doing, we have to go to the high octane fuel, so to speak. The human growth hormone also increases the body's ability to utilise protein. Protein's essential for the building in the body. Protein's essential for healing. Protein's essential for maintenance. So we need to eat adequate protein. We need to make sure we're not drinking a lot of water with our meals, which will water down our digestive juices, as we'll see tomorrow night when we go on the journey through the gut. Well, here's another aspect. This high-intensity interval training will increase the body's ability to utilise protein. The human growth hormone also increases the circulation of the blood to the skin. That means it slows down aging. Keeps your feet and your extremities warm because the blood's moving. Remember, the blood is the life of the flesh. The movie stars pay $1,000 a week for this because their profession, their work is dependent on them looking good. Well, you're getting it cut price today. 15 minutes, high intensity interval training a day will cause a release of the human growth hormone and it will remain active for 24 hours. That's a good deal, isn't it? It's the best insurance policy you can make. The busier my program is, the more I make time to exercise. Because I know that my performance in the work that I do is dependent on exercise. It's dependent on a few things, but exercise is a big one. So if you don't think you've got time to exercise, it's time to do an assessment on what you do with your time. And you'll come to the conclusion after you start doing this that you can't afford not to do it. I challenge you and see if you're not better prepared physically, mentally, spiritually, emotionally for everything that happens in the day when you implement the exercise. And remember, Dr. Doug McCuff, he did this for his heart patients. And he says in his book, when you start to do this, we're not going to be able to hold you down because your energy levels will be so good. Because when you do that and those lungs expand, does that mean every cell in the body is going to be getting 36 units of energy? Well, I've got some good news. I draw it as if there is one energy cycle per cell, there can be hundreds. In fact, the more you exercise, the more energy cycles the body develops because it needs those little machines that make the fuel or use the fuel to give you energy. And that's why exercise is absolutely essential if you want a strong heart. Sleep. Last night we looked at why we sleep. Eight hours, not negotiable. Did you get your 8 hours last night? Remember, if you're not getting it and you're not used to it, you can train yourself into it. Little by little, you can increase it. 6, there are some herbs. Psalm 104 verse 14, the Bible says God gave herbs for the service of man. Cayenne pepper. Cayenne pepper does 3 things. It thins the blood. It opens the capillaries. And it also can strengthen the arterial wall. So if someone has blocked arteries, can they unblock them? Absolutely. Dr. Agatha Thresh has passed now, but when she was alive, she was the doctor and her husband that started Uchi Pines, the health retreat in Georgia. She gives a story of a lady who came to their retreat who was an alcoholic. She'd been an alcoholic for 40 years. She had a total turnaround at the health retreat. She had a total turnaround in her health. She did the detox, and she had a total turnaround in her faith as a Christian. And she said to Agatha, I don't want to go home. And Agatha said, I think we can make a place for you here. And she used to help a little bit in the garden. When she came, she had 80% occlusion of her main arteries. That means she was built up with that atherosclerosis. After 10 months, unfortunately, she had an embolism in her brain and she died. Agatha did a post-mortem on her and her arteries were clear. That's 10 months from 80% occlusion or blockage to totally clear. And she was not a young woman, she was in her 70s. You can't always put a name or a number on it because there's only one way to really test it, and that's an angiogram, and that's putting radioactive dye into your blood, and I don't know, I'm not real happy about that. But we had a guest, and he was a Samoan man, big man, and he was in his late 60s, and he had had an angiogram because he was getting so many pains in his heart, and he had 85% blockage of 2 main arteries. But he didn't like the alternatives. He did not like the sound of having a bypass. He said, do you think you can help me? And I said, if you choose to come here, I believe you will be helped. Now, he found it very hard to exercise because he got so breathless. The blood carries the oxygen. So if not a lot of blood's getting through, one of the reactions is the person will get breathless very easily. So he got breathless very easy. I said, when you get breathless, stop. Breathe very deeply, let your breath come back, and walk again. I said, you might only be able to do 10 steps on the hill and then stop. And that's what he did. After 2 days, he was doing 15 steps, then stopping. By the end of the week, he was doing 30 steps and then stopping. And I said to him, I can't tell you for sure, but the fact that you're not as breathless tells me that I think the arteries are starting to clear. So he never had to have his operation, and he never had a heart attack, and he never had a stroke, and he never went back to have another angiogram, but the fact that he no more had the heart pain, he also was able to exercise. That was telling him that his arteries are starting to be clear. So cayenne pepper, how much do you take? Start with 1/4 teaspoon, and that can be taken, I think the easiest way to take it is in about 1/3 cup of water, just a little bit of water. And down it goes. It'll give a little tingle, but the tingle passes quite quickly. As you get used to it, and that's 3 times a day. As you get used to it, you can go up to 1/2 teaspoon. In the book by Jethro Kloss, Back to Eden, he devotes 1/2 page to every herb and 10 pages to cayenne pepper. And he shows in there, he quotes a few doctors that are using it in their practice. And one of them said it's impossible to abuse cayenne pepper. It will never cause a lesion and it will never burn. It might feel like it, but it's more the fact that it stimulates blood, which basically feeds your nerves. The best blood thinner is actually water. And the reason I know that is that at Misty Mountain Health Retreat, I used to do a live blood analysis. I would take a drop of blood, put it on a slide, and we'd put it under the microscope, and the blood would come up on the screen. Now blood, it should be bouncing around like this. And sometimes I would see it clumped like that. And whenever I saw it clumped like that, I always presumed I'd spoiled the slide, because it's very easy to spoil a slide. But often 5 blood slides later, it's still looking like that. So I would say to the person, have you drunk any water today? And 98% of the time it was, no. And they've just come to the retreat, and a lot of people wouldn't drink much water because they didn't want to keep stopping, or they were on the plane and they didn't want to have to keep stopping. Now I looked at their blood a few days later and it was like this. Now they're drinking water. That's how I know that the best blood thinner is water. Now when that blood goes through the lungs, it takes on oxygen like a little parcel. How much oxygen does this one pick up? Can you see the surface area that's been lost because of dehydration? And the body likes the water to go in little by little by little all through the day. The other heart herb, which is a specific for the heart, is the hawthorn berry. And the hawthorn berry strengthens the heart. If the blood pressure is high, the hawthorn berry will bring it down. If the blood pressure is low, the hawthorn berry will bring it up. And by the way, if there's any bleeding in the body, the cayenne pepper will seal that bleeding. But it can also dilate all the blood vessels. Now, it seems to be that the cayenne pepper and the hawthorn berry do opposite things. How can this be? Psalm 104 verse 14 says, God gave herbs for the service of man. So these herbs come in and they work with the needs of your body. Medication does not do that. Medication just comes in and medication says, I've got a job to do whether you need it or not. So the man that came to our health retreat, his name was Henry, this is a few years ago. He was in his late 60s and he was on 6 medication. He was on medication for blood pressure, for blood cholesterol, for blood thinning, blood sugars, and also gout and stomach ulcer. So I said to him, are you interested in coming off any of your medication? He said, no, thank you very much. I'm happy with my medication. I've just come here to lose a bit of weight. Now, I always respect everyone's right to choose what's going into their body. But we gave him hawthorn berry every day. So 2 teaspoons are cooked in 1 cup of water, and we gave him 4 cups of that a day. Because it's a hard berry, it has a gentle simmer for 15 minutes. At the end of the week, we don't see a lot of change in blood pressure in a week. At the end of the week, he said, I'll take some hawthorn berry with me. Henry rang me up 4 months later. He said, I'd like to come and get more hawthorn berries. He said, I'd like to get some of my friends off their medication. I said, come for lunch, Henry. When I opened the door, I hardly recognised Henry. He had lost 20 kilos in 4 months. What's that, 40 pounds? He said, yes, I can do my coat up now. He was a retired judge, was Henry. I think he was about 68. all the puffiness had gone out of his face. I couldn't stop looking at him. He looked like a different man. He said, I've got a few stories for you. I went to my doctor recently to have my blood pressure taken, and the doctor went to walk out of the room. And Henry said, what are you doing? He said, the machine's broken. He says, why do you say that? He said, well, this machine says your blood pressure is 120 on 80, and your blood pressure always sits at 180 over 90, 95. That's on medication. Henry said, that's my blood pressure now. He said, the doctor has taken me off all my medication because my blood thinning's normal, my blood pressure's normal, my blood cholesterol's normal, my blood sugar is normal, and I have no more gout, and I have no more stomach ulcer. Who took him off the meds? The doctor. Because if the doctor didn't, his blood pressure would go too low. His blood thinning would go too low. Because remember, the drugs just come in and say, I've got a job to do whether you need it or not. It doesn't matter how much cayenne pepper you take, you will never get blood so thin that every time you knock your arm, you'll bruise. And isn't that what happens with medical blood thinners? One man said to me, I'm so glad I've heard this because I'm starting to get blood coming out of my nose. He said, every time I bump myself, I'm bleeding. He said, I want a blood thinner that is not going to do that to me. So absolutely the hydration and the cayenne pepper will do that. It will keep your blood nice and thin without causing bleeding noses or bruising every time you bump yourself. I said, Henry, tell me what you're eating. He said, I have a spaghetti bowl every morning, have chopped fruit and whole grain cereal, and I have coconut cream on top. Did you hear that? 40 pound lost on coconut cream every morning. And he said, I have the ground flaxseed and chia on that. And he said, I usually have a slice of sourdough spelt toast with avocado and tomato. That's not a light breakfast, is it? He said, and I eat my next meal about 5-6 hours later. He said, I have a big salad. He said, I have some cooked veggies, maybe steamed, baked or stir-fried. He was a bachelor. And he said, I have some sort of protein. He said, I find if I make a lentil dish, that'll last me a couple of days. So he said, I really only have to cook a legume dish 2, sometimes 3 times a week. And I might have another slice of sourdough toast with avocado and tomato. And he said, and I do not eat again till breakfast. Very decisive man. He would have been a good judge. I said, that's impressive, Henry. Now, he lost 40 pounds on that. He said, it's like I'm not even on a diet. I said, tell me about your exercise, because he could not get that sort of results without exercise. He said, well, I exercise every day. He said, I find I can go further with less effort and less amount of time. As the weight drops off, as the heart and the muscles get stronger, he can go further in less amount of time. He said, I'm finding I'm walking another block every week. He said, and the good news is, and he said, and I know all this is pretty good news, I don't have to have my total knee replacement operation now because my knees are happy because I've lost the weight. It's an impressive story because Henry chose to stay on his medication. What Henry did was he proved to his doctor that he didn't need that medication. And the doctors need us to prove that to them. Some people I find, when they hear this lecture, they stop their medication. You can stop the cholesterol-lowering medication immediately. There will be a side effect though. Your memory will return. But even if you've been on it 20 years, you can stop it immediately. The blood thinners that they advise are often aspirin. The research now is showing that aspirin causes eye bleeds, brain bleeds and stomach bleeds. It's one of the #1 causes of stomach ulcer. And that can be stopped immediately. Just make sure you're drinking adequate water. You've got to do your part to make sure that blood's nice and thin. With the blood pressure medication, the hawthorn berry can be used in conjunction with that. And what I find when people start losing weight, they start exercising, start drinking more water, the blood pressure automatically starts to come down. And what some people choose to do is, as it comes down, then they'll start easing off their medication. So the hawthorn berry, you can drink it as a tea, or you can take it in a tablet or a capsule form, and you can be having 4,000 to 5,000 milligrams a day. It's a very safe herb, and it can be used, as I said, in conjunction with other medication, not a problem. As with the cayenne pepper, that also can be used in conjunction with other medication. So you can see why I wanted to devote 2 meetings to heart health, because I wanted to cover every single aspect of high blood pressure, of heart health. I wanted to show you how you can keep your heart with all diligence, but also keep those blood vessels strong, keep them clear, and if they're not clear, how you can clear them out. So we've got 5 minutes left. Are there any questions?
Barbara, I wanted to ask a couple of questions about exercise. The push-ups, can they be done from the knee, or should they be done from the feet?
Ladies can do knees.
Okay.
But make sure that your body is a board.
Right.
So when you do the push-ups, you don't go like that. You must have that board up and down.
What about jumping rope?
Jumping rope one can do. The problem with jump rope is there is a bit of jarring there, but it's very important if you jump rope or if you run, you must toe strike. Okay. Because our toes were designed to cushion and take the load. Unfortunately, with many joggers today, it encourages heel striking. And it's the heel striking when running that causes lower back and hamstring problems. But the beauty of the rebounder is there's a cushioning effect. There's no jarring with the rebounder. So the rebounder is superior to the skip rope. Okay.
Just one more question. Well, I've got the cereal that you would cook overnight. You said millet and buckwheat. What were the other ones?
Quinoa.
Quinoa.
Brown rice can be a nice overnight cereal too.
Okay.
Triglycerides. What is if you have high triglycerides, what does that have to do?
This is triglycerides, the stored carbohydrates stored as triglycerides. So they often say high triglycerides are another indication, but it's actually just high carbohydrate. That's how the glucose is stored as triglycerides. So you can easily get that down by getting the carbohydrate content down.
Dark chocolate or cocoa? Is it good?
Sorry, what was that?
Dark chocolate or cocoa?
Dark chocolate. Dark chocolate has caffeine in it, and it certainly doesn't have as much sugar in it. There's not a lot of caffeine in 1 square, but not many people can stop at 1 square, so they're actually best, they're best not having it.
Vitamin D pills, are those good for you? Because my husband tells us that helps. And every time I take a vitamin D pill, my legs hurt.
Okay, well my suggestion is don't take the vitamin D tablet anymore.
I stopped.
The legs are telling you not to. The best place to get it is out there in the sunshine and take the tops off, get as much exposure as possible. And it is true that vitamin D does help with every disease.
Yes, I've come across this quote in Counsels and Diets and Foods. It says, the stomach has not power to convert poor, heavy, sour bread into good food, but this poor bread will convert a healthy stomach into a diseased one. So what is the difference between the sour bread that you're referring to and the one she talks about here?
If you let sourdough bread sit too long, it goes sour and heavy, and it's indigestible. She says in that quote, bread should be light and sweet, and a very good sourdough bread is light and sweet. It would be better if the sourdough bread was called cultured bread, because it's a cultured bread. So I've got a few comments on that. So Jesus talked about the sourdough bread in a few illustrations. He said, the kingdom of heaven is like a woman that took a little bit of leaven and put it into the flour, and it leavened the whole lump. And he also said, I think it's 1 Corinthians 5 verse 6, know ye not that a little leaven leaveneth the whole lump? That's the sourdough bread. And when the Israelites were in the desert for 40 years, and they had to put leaven out of their house for 7 days while they were celebrating the Passover, what was the leaven? There is only one thing that it could have been, and that is the sourdough culture. And all through Europe for centuries, the sourdough bread is the only bread that people ate. And as I said, like sauerkraut, if you let it go too long, it can go bad, it can go sour, really sour, and produce alcohol. Then it shouldn't be eaten. Bread should be light and sweet, not sour and heavy. I hope that answers your question.
I'll ask more later.
For therapeutic purposes, is there a danger or benefit in doing plant-based ketogenic diet?
There certainly is a benefit in doing the plant-based ketogenic diet, and personally, I mostly do that. And the reason why I have a low carbohydrate diet and I eat high fibre, generous proteins, I eat legumes every day, often every meal, and nuts and seeds, is that I have so much energy, my weight just stays the same, I sleep very well, I love what it does, brain works well. Most people just eat too many carbohydrates. So the ketogenic plant-based diet, it's an excellent one. I've seen people conquer cancer on it, I've seen people conquer their diabetes on it, I've seen many people lose weight on it. So basically, with every person, you've got to do what suits you.
And I heard it's good for like Alzheimer's disease too.
Absolutely, because the brain loves fat. So the ketogenic diet has good fats in it.
So my question is, I saw where you said the 4,000 to 5,000 milligrams of the tablet of hawthorn, but how many times would you drink it if it was in a tea?
If it's in a tea, you would usually have a litre or a quart a day. So that would be 8 teaspoons of the berry in a quart of water with a slow simmer.
I have an online question. It says, tips with dealing with seasonal and unavoidable allergies, runny nose, stuffy head, anything that can be done to minimize these symptoms in adults and kids.
I've seen people get off, I've seen people conquer cat allergies, pollen allergies, horse allergies by stopping the 5 common allergens, which is hybridized wheat, dairy, oats, peanuts, and refined sugar. And it can take at least 2 months before you see a result.
What would you recommend for somebody who's on Plavix because they have multiple vessel stents, not cardiac, but...
Sorry, they have what?
Multiple, like my hepatic artery and portal vein and SMA has a stent in it, and so I'm on Plavix to keep my blood from clotting.
Plavix, sorry, the accent, I'm not used to that accent. And I can understand the person can be a bit hesitant, but I've met people who have stents and they do this.
Okay.
And they find that it works very well.
And you mentioned that the potatoes, if they were not organic, they had the Roundup on them. Is there anything you can do, like peeling the potato or anything that would eliminate that?
No, there's nothing you can do.
So,
sorry.
Is that sweet potatoes as well?
Sweet potatoes are not a potato, they are a yam. So the sweet potato is harvested totally differently.
I'm going to kind of elaborate a little bit on this. Back in 2005, I had a cardiac arrest from a birth defect 3 times in one night. And when I left the hospital, I ended up on all this medication. And about 10 years afterwards, I couldn't walk up my steps. They had given me Lipitor 80 milligrams. That's a lot. And I asked my doctor one time, I never had high cholesterol. Why did you guys put me on this? And they said, well, when you have issues like you had, where you went in a cardiac arrest 3 times, the FDA has these things that the doctors have to give you, protocol. And I still have muscle problems today, but I took myself off of all this stuff. And my doctors, because unfortunately with my health care, I have to go once a year to have a physical. And they give me the hardest time about, you're not on cholesterol, you're not doing this, and you have I had a bypass because I had a birth defect. And now they put in a metal stent because I started going into cardiac arrest in 2012 because the bypass, one of them didn't take and the other one was failing. And I told my husband one day, about 10 years later, I said, I can't do this. I can't walk up 3 steps. I said, this is no quality of life. So I made a decision, and I just dropped all my medicine, and I've stayed plant-based, and I feel good today. But I do still have muscle issues where sometimes when I'm kneeling, I have a hard time getting back up. Hopefully one day that'll go away. But
How long were you on the Lipitor for?
let's see, I went into cardiac arrest. I was 41, and I came off of it when I was 50 or 51. About 10 years.
So that's yes, that's a long time. So I'd just like to say, well done.
Yes.
Well done for coming off it. And what one lady said to me, she conquered her rheumatoid arthritis, and she goes to see her doctor every 6 months, and she doesn't tell him that she's off her medication because he'll get too angry. So she sits there, we say like a stunned mullet. And she doesn't say...
They can tell that I'm not connected to all my
Yeah.
yeah.
So she goes to the doctor, and he writes out the scripts, and she nods and takes it. But you know, she's conquered it. She's doing well.
Amen. Thank God good.
Yep. Okay. Looks like we've finished.